Well, if you guys remember not too long ago, actually a year ago, we had our hopes and dreams all set aside for this specific phone, the Google Pixel 4 XL, and this was the time, I think this was the turning point of the Pixel lineup, especially when it came down to the camera standpoint. When this phone first came out, I mean, all the rumors and everything were saying that, man, this phone's camera is going to be the best of that year, as it was the year before and the year before, but that really ended up taking a toll on Google themselves, and they really actually positioned themselves to just kind of flopping with the Pixel 4 XL, and they kind of flopped with the Pixel 3. Honestly, I think the Pixel 2 and the 2 XL were the last Pixels that were actually like groundbreaking, even though the 3 and 3 XL were better in every single way probably. But when it came down to the Pixel 4 XL, it seemed like it took things from the Pixel 3 XL and the Pixel 2 XL, which were already, a couple of year old phones, and they combined it into this phone with the newer chipset, which might seem like a bigger thing, and I honestly think it really wasn't that bad of a phone, but it just seems like it came and it went, Phones like the Galaxy S10, even phone like an iPhone XR, these phones last for a long time in the news cycle and just people's opinions on, the best phones of last year and stuff. Even though the Pixel 4, even the OnePlus 7 Pro, that is a really good phone as well. The Pixel 4 XL, even though it had stock Android, a higher refresh rate panel, a decent performing device, doesn't really make the cut of being one of the best phones out there ever, even of 2019, which is kind of sad. And over a year later now, I mean, even in later part of 2020, the price has gone down quite a bit. It's super easy to get them, but it just seems like not that many people want them anymore. Now, if you want to pick them up, I'll leave the cheapest one that I can find on Amazon in the description below. You can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, that 6.3-inch P OLED panel on the Pixel 4 XL was definitely not a bad panel, I don't think. It was a 1440p panel, but when you looked at things, even like the OnePlus 7 Pro, in my opinion, I think that one had a better looking panel than this one, and it just didn't feel as good. This phone just didn't feel that good compared to the competition. Even though it was pretty much priced like the competition almost, it just didn't perform that well in my opinion. And even though this thing feels more premium than the Pixel 5, I do have more respect for the Pixel 5 than the 4 XL definitely. And the panel itself, even though it had that 90Hz refresh rate, I think the refresh rate really saved it, but I think the panel itself didn't really look too great, especially with that top bezel. I just didn't really think it looked that great, to be honest. Now, it did have that USB Type-C port on the bottom, and it had, a matte finish on the back, which I think is pretty cool. I actually did kind of like that a lot. And it felt kind of like, I don't know, it felt really rugged, and that was something I really did like about it. This thing also had wireless charging, which was great. And the biggest thing about this phone that I really didn't like, there were two things about it. The first thing being that this phone's base capacity was 64 gigabytes, which is fine, and I'm totally okay with that. But the top tier configuration of this phone, the maximum amount of storage you could get from this thing was 128 gigabytes. That is a very small amount of storage to have on a device like this, in my opinion. I mean, that is like peanuts, for the iPhone 12 Pro. The base model of that is the same storage as the top tier model of the Pixel 4 XL. And I think what Google was trying to do was, have people, sign up for more Google Drive storage and stuff like that, which is a very smart thing when it comes down to the actual, of people trying to sign up for, that kind of stuff. And I have a lot of respect for Google doing that, but I also lose a lot of respect, even more respect than even gaining it, by them only tapping out the storage at 128 gigs. But the second thing I didn't really like about the Pixel 4 XL was that camera, to be completely honest. We had that 12.2 megapixel wide angle lens, and we had a 16 megapixel telephoto lens as well. So that camera lens in and of itself, this was one of the first times I think we saw that dual camera setup on the Pixel lineup, which I personally liked. I like having dual camera setups as always. I keep saying this over and over again, but the big thing to keep in mind is that when they went up on stage, they said that more people would rather prefer a, telephoto lens than an ultra-wide sensor. Already they were destined to fail. They need both. They needed the telephoto lens and the ultra-wide sensor, just like how a lot of manufacturers were already doing that. And this was not a cheap phone. This was not a budget phone. This phone should have had that capability from the beginning with. And you could only do, on top of everything I just said, you could only do 4K at 30 on the back camera. Now, in the 2018 model of this phone, the Pixel 3 and 3 XL, that was kind of okay. We were already getting 4K at 60 pretty much all across the board, but the quality of the photos were great and everything was pretty much good. And even at that year, a lot of people were still saying that camera might be good and maybe one of the best ones. But when it came down to this year, and I remember just now talking about it last year, like 4K at 60 was the norm. And it was funny because Google sent me this phone, for free, and I was like, all right, well, I'm probably gonna be super happy about it and stuff. But honestly, I was afraid they weren't going to send me any phones anymore, because I was like, 4K at 60 is like the minimum, and this phone's camera wasn't even that great to begin with. And they kept sending me phones since then. They sent me the Pixel 5 too, so hopefully, I mean, I think they care about the realness, to be honest. And I don't really hate this phone, but that camera really wasn't that great, and it really shattered me, because I was like, the Pixel lineup had the best camera, the Pixel lineup, and I liked it because it was stock Android. Unfortunately, it's kind of doomed, just like how the Nexus lineup was for the specific camera setup. As of right now, I think the Galaxy S20 Ultra and just the Galaxies are dominating the camera space. I think they're even, iPhone is behind them, but to each their own. You can only do 1080p on the front camera as well, and it was like a step backwards from the Pixel 3 XL, because I think the 3 XL had an additional lens to it too. This one did not have that, so it was kind of like a watered down camera at the same price tag as a lot of the flagship phones. Now the Pixel lineup with the Pixel 5, they took that away, and now they're only focusing on specific kind of mid-tier models and budget tier models, which I think is a smarter thing. So in terms of the camera, that covers it up there. Now software wise, this is this phone's biggest asset. It started off with Android 10. It's gotten Android 11 by now, and it's only going to be getting more and more versions of Android for probably another 2-3 years. A really good thing about this specific phone is that it is stock Android, but also custom ROM support is out there too. So this phone's, software support is going to be lasting for a very, very long time, probably longer than OnePlus and, Samsung and all those other manufacturers. So in terms of software, that covers that up. Now performance wise, this was another area where I kind of wanted more from this device, but it actually wasn't too bad. It had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset and 6 gigs of RAM. And honestly, in my opinion, for that amount of RAM, 6 gigs on a phone that doesn't have a lot of, stuff running in the background, it's actually not that bad of a thing. This phone doesn't have, 8 or 12 gigs of RAM, but it doesn't need it because it's pretty stock in its nature. And I will be honest, that 90Hz refresh rate does make the phone feel that much smoother overall. So that in and of itself is one way to look at it. Now, when you look at all, the other phones all across the board, I mean, like I said before, I mean, that's a huge thing that this phone's performance was supposed to be the top tier one. And it's still smooth, it's still fast, it still does everything, but it still kind of leaves me a little bit more to be desired, just like I stated. I feel like, with a lot of the other manufacturers at this point, even at that point, they were kind of, experimenting with more and more RAM. And honestly, even though I hate One UI, at least they go ahead and, Samsung puts a bunch of just features and everything inside of it. But I will always love, stock Android and everything. So in terms of the performance, I can tell you even on the later part of 2020, it's going to be perfectly fine. Whatever you do with it, it's going to be, nobody's going to really care at this point. But it's still a fast, smooth phone. It's just not the fastest phone, and nobody's going to look back at this specific device and pick it up just because of the performance. Some people may pick it up because of the software, because of the stock software, and because of just the overall feeling of it in the hands, and because of the Google phone. But I think for a majority of people out there, picking up something like a Galaxy S10 or something may be a better choice, but that's regardless. The performance of this phone is still pretty good for the most part. Now, battery life wise, this thing had a 3700 mAh battery inside of it, and it had wireless charging, which was great. But because the battery size was kind of lower in today's standards, I mean, the Galaxy S20 has an over 4000 mAh battery, and there's a lot of phones out there that are the top tier phones. Even of last year, we look at the Galaxy S10 Plus, that thing had a much bigger battery than this thing did. And it's very weird, that they would put that type of battery size in this phone. Typically, iPhones have lower milliamp hours on their phones than Androids, and the 11 Pro Max that came out right before this one didn't even have that capability. That phone actually had less battery life inside of it than this. The Google Pixel 4 XL actually had a smaller battery size than the iPhone 11 Pro Max, which is very weird. So I will tell you, at the end of the day, there's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons with the battery life, but the Pixel 4 XL's battery life left a lot more to be desired, in my opinion. So to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, I mean, is the Pixel 4 XL still worth it in the later part of 2020? Well, what I can tell you is that there's not necessarily a perfect answer, because to be honest, this phone is still a really good phone. Even though I kind of hit on it and, that's not perfect. No phone is perfect, but I was kind of expecting a little bit more from this device. I just didn't think it felt like the most premium thing at the hands. I felt like, the storage models were the one thing that really made me the most upset. And there's no micro SD card slot in this thing either, so you're really only tapped out at 128 gigs. The Galaxy S20, the Galaxy S10, all these phones have micro SD card slot supports, but even if you look at the OnePlus devices, at least they give you a lot of storage options to choose from, and they have different RAM configurations and stuff like that. This one, only that one model, take it or leave it, and it was like a flagship phone, and it left a lot more to be desired. If this phone was a $699 phone when it first came out, that would have made it a little bit better. But because it was, the price that it was, it made it, the expectations were just just now met, but it's still a pretty fast phone. Like I said before, anything you're going to do with it, it's going to be able to handle it. That refresh rate is really, really nice on it, and that's something I really do like about it. I'm glad this one had wireless charging too, which is really cool. The camera quality itself isn't bad. It's actually pretty good. But it just comes down to the features, it doesn't really have too many features. And on top of that, no 4K on no 4K on the 60 frames per second, which is very weird. And no 4K on the front either. That's honestly kind of outdated too. So there's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons, but I don't really think there's necessarily a huge reason to pick this phone up over something like a OnePlus 7 Pro or OnePlus 7T Pro. And you can find those for probably even cheaper than you can find these ones, to be honest. So that probably covers it up for the most part. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.